working on the 56 Buick. I'm gonna get this thing up and running better, get the cooling system flushed out, fix a few things, and just get her back up on the road. So let's go ahead and get into it. As you guys saw in the beginning of the video, this is our 56 Buick Century, two-door hardtop. This is actually my mom's car in the sense that we bought it for her. She loves this car. This is her baby. We have this thing running, driving, licensed, insured vehicle. It's completely original. Whole drivetrain, interior paint, completely original car. The only thing we did different with it is we put a different carburetor on it, mainly because the original carburetor was pretty gummed up. But what we're doing today is something I've been meaning to do for a while, but during the winter there's kind of no point in doing it because it's way too freaking cold outside. Now that it's warming up a little bit, it's going to be somewhat better to do it. So when we were driving it through the summer, it tended to have a lot of overheating issues. We put an electric fan on the radiator. That solved the issues most of the way, but we kind of boiled it down to the fact that this is a very old motor. It's a 322 nail head from 1956. It honestly is gummed up with a lot of rust. It has a lot of rust in the cooling system and it's pretty clogged up. And so we determined that we needed to do a full radiator flush. And we determined that the best way to do that was to take the radiator out and fully clean it, all that. But in the process, if you come and take a look here, we ended up snipping off the transcooler lines down here by accident in the process because the original radiator has a factory transcooler, but the lines, as you can imagine, were rusty and seized, and they ended up twisting right off. So we ended up stopping the progress with that because we had to deal with the whole fact that the transcooler lines were twisted off and the radiator was gummed up anyways, and there's just it was a whole mess, and we just waited throughout the winter to do it because honestly she could sit in the garage and she was just fine. Well, today is finally the day that I'm going to get around to actually fixing this car. So if you look over here, what we have is I got the radiator right here sitting on the ground. I hit it with a coat of paint and called it good. It still honestly is really clean. We did a bunch of like flushing with different chemicals. We hit it with some Purple Power. We tried like just a few like name brand or off brand even radiator flushes, and we let them sit in there for quite a while. It was able to get a lot of the rust out of this thing, but I mean honestly, this thing being as old as it is, it's doing pretty well. This is the electric fan I was telling you guys about that I put on there. Like I said, it helps enough, but eventually I assume that we're probably gonna have to replace this thing because it's pretty beat up. I mean, again, it's from 1956. You can't imagine that it's gonna be running that great. So the goal is today to get this back in. We got some new fittings to put in the transcooler here because this is the part where the transcooler is. So we got new fittings to put on there. That basically what we're gonna do is we're going to cut off where the transcooler lines are crushed and run a soft line from the transcooler line hard line into the fitting on there and call it good. Originally we were thinking about just looping it, but we were able to get the right fittings and get kind of what we needed to be able to do that. So yeah. Alright, so part of what I'm going to do while this thing's apart is this is the thermostat housing right here, or well, where the thermostat housing sits. I'm going to hit this with the wire brush real quick on the drill just to kind of clear out some of the flake and the crust that I can personally see in there. And we'll kind of go from there with what all we're going to get into. I mean, there's not really a lot we can do, but let's see what happens when I clean this thing out. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw that, but the amount of just brown, cloudy dust that came out of that thing. There's a lot of flakes down in there that, honestly, we're going to have to work on flushing out anyways. But, again, it's not going to be amazing. This whole block is just full of garbage. Let's see. I know, here, I'm going to go ahead and take the heater core hose off real quick, because I guarantee that that fitting is clogged up. And yes, I did already loosen this. The hose itself isn't too terribly bad, but if you guys take a look in here, the actual fitting itself is pretty freaking crusty and not really looking that great. So, I mean, this whole thing, it's been sitting with water in it for a long time. I can guarantee you that. I don't think that they really ran a lot of coolant in this thing. So let's see. I'm gonna grab a screwdriver real quick and see if I can kind of go ahead and scrape that out. I know this is probably not the best way to do it. I know I should probably take the fitting off, but the likelihood that this fitting is actually going to come off is very, very low. And I don't really want to deal with that right now. I just want to get the car back together. Oh, man. There's a lot of crust in there. That's going to be good enough for now. When I do get the radiator back in here, we're going to run, we're going to bypass the heater core lines temporarily, just so I can put the radiator flush fluid stuff through the block, and we're going to run the block real warm and get the block actually cleared out and kind of go from there and see how well that works out. I mean, I don't really know. I don't know if it's going to work as great as we want it to, but we're hoping that anything's better than how bad it was running with the temperature and stuff. Because, I mean, like, you driving it around, it was totally fine, but you start sitting there idling in traffic and the thing would just start getting a little too warm for our comfort. Because, honestly, tell me the next time you're going to be able to find a set of head gaskets for this or a new head for this if we warp a head. So any bit too warm is too much for us. We just don't want to risk it. So I'm going to go ahead and start by snipping off these trans-cooler lines down here, and I will kind of show you guys how I'm going to do that. Alright, so I'm going to crawl up under this car right now. I know you guys are probably yelling at me that it's probably just easier to jack the car up, but honestly, this car sits up pretty high as it is. It's not really that hard to get up underneath of it. I'm just going to use a simple pipe cutter and cut off these lines where they're twisted, because honestly right now it's easier than just replacing a whole hard line. Just like that, and it gives you a nice clean cut. And you guys can see how twisted that line was when it came off. I mean, I heated it up and everything, but I gave it one good twist and it just freaking came right off. Like, these things were old and crusty. So we don't have a way to flare these right now, which, yes, is the proper way to do it, but honestly, it's not a high pressure system. It's just a trans-cooler line in an old car. It's not like it's, you know, some, you know, high fuel pressure or something. So I think we're gonna just temporarily, for now, just put the rubber line to this without a flare on it, and maybe if we have to, we'll like double clamp it or something and just run this to the radiator. And I mean, that should work, honestly, and even if it leaks a little bit, we'll get a way to flare it. But I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and I'll bring you guys back in and show you kind of how they look like. These are the two lines that I cut off. You can see just how badly crimped, or not crimped, how crushed they got, but thankfully with that pipe cutter we're able to get nice clean cuts on the other end of them. Now, if you guys see it down here, this is, I'm assuming, the main in and the main out. The reason I say that is once I cut this off, once the crush part of the line was off, it started leaking immediately, whereas this one doesn't. So I'm pretty sure this is the feed and this is the return. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're still learning about 1956 Buick stuff. Time to get this old girl back in here. Very, very delicately. Oh man, it is a tight fit between that water pump and that electric fan. We got lucky with that though, because when we took the mechanical fan off this, because of course, you know, originally would have had the mechanical fan. When we took the mechanical fan off, we had just barely enough clearance to be able to fit this electric fan in here, but just enough to make it work pretty well. I'm gonna try and get one or two of these bolts in just real quick. That should be enough to hold it up now. Yeah. I think we'll be good on the amount of rubber line I got. Yeah, I think it'll be good. We got two of these in here. I'm gonna go ahead and get those in there real quick. I'm gonna go ahead, crawl up under here and tighten these. but give them a nice, good, snug, tight fit on there. Hopefully they won't leak. We'll find out. And if they do, we'll just loop the line. The plan is this line right here, we're just gonna run a very short, soft line between here and here, make up that space. And then over here, we have to kind of make this gentle turn right here so that we don't end up like kinking the line or anything. I think it'll be all right. I'm hoping that we can also reuse the thermostat gasket too, because again, tell me where you're gonna find a 56 Buick Century 322 nailhead thermostat gasket. It might be more common than I think, but I can't find parts for this thing, so yeah, it's not gonna be great. It's gonna work. We're just hoping that we can get the car back on the road right now. That's really our whole goal with any of our cars, is just get them on the road, you know, working on them as they're running and driving. The line's down here, and I mean, this one is going to be a nice, just short little piece. Probably, we'll go about probably like right there. So, like I said, I'll run 2 clamps on this thing if I have to. Prefer not to. Alright, let's get this thing cut real quick. Let's see. Should be more than enough line. Yeah. Okay, so we'll get some hose clamps for that. And then this piece is the only piece I'm kind of semi-worried about, but I think if I push it back, I can get enough of a soft turn out of that it won't kink the line. Because really, so here's the reason I'm so worried about this line particularly, besides just the fact that it's kinking, that is, if this is the supply line, it's going to be pushing fluid through, and if it gets kinked, it's going to push the fluid, but it's not going to be able to push it through here, so it's not going to be able to return, meaning the trans isn't going to be getting its fluid. And you really don't want to burn up the kind of transits in this car, because I dare you to look up a Dynaflow trans and how they work, because Buick did some crazy freaking stuff back in 1956. And look up a Buick Dynaflow transmission and a torque drive, or a torque tube, I mean, and you have to basically remove most of the drivetrain just to replace the transmission, and that doesn't include the fact of finding and or sourcing a new transmission. So that's actually why we're being so cautious with this trans. Is the cooling system, it sucks, but it can be repaired. The trans, that's the one thing we cannot lose right now, because they are ridiculously hard to replace and or find. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and source up some hose clamps real quick, find me some hose clamps for this. So here we are in the shop real quick. You guys know this space pretty well. This is my dad's 406 small block. He probably doesn't want me to show you guys this, but let's be real here. We're car people. Things happen. Things get screwed up. Reason we have this motor sitting on the engine stand is I posted a video a little while back about you guys, for you guys to see about my dad's motor running. That was quite a few months ago, probably almost a year ago. I don't even remember. Winter came, and we were running water in this block, and I flushed it out. I take full responsibility of this. I think it is my fault. I don't think I flushed enough water out of the block, because if you look right here, during the winter, I think it was last winter, the block cracked all the way across on both sides. It split right in the cooling jacket, and what honestly frustrates me the most is it didn't even pop the freeze plugs. It just split the block. So I take blame for that. So if you're watching this, Dad, I'm sorry that I screwed up your motor. I do take blame for that. But we are gonna salvage some parts off of his motor real quick. We need these hose clamps off the fuel line. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these off. Also, so you don't worry, we already did drain the oil out of this. So don't worry that you're thinking like, oh, the oil's getting in the cylinders or anything like that. We fully took all the oil out of it. We have it on its side because we're gonna, maybe not the most orthodox way of doing things, but we're gonna use JB Weld to fix the cracks in the block. Because we were told by a really good buddy of ours that you can use marine JB Weld for cracks in the engine block like this, and it actually works surprisingly well to seal up the coolant jackets or cooling jackets, whatever the term is. So I will go ahead and get these off. I just thought I'd show you guys a little bit of a sneak peek. Eventually I do plan to do some videos on his motor. Hopefully soon we'll get this car back together because, I mean, this is my dad's car. I'd love to see it back on the road. But right now, we gotta salvage some parts off of it. Get this one off too. I need all 4 of these right here. So we had it together like this because we ran it on the ground for a little bit just for fun. Just, you know, so we can still hear it run. Because of course it still runs. We made sure it still runs. It didn't like split the block in a way that makes it to where it can't run. It just made it to where you can't, it won't hold coolant. So I went and salvaged some of these hose clamps from my dad's motor. Again, sorry Dad, but I gotta use them. Let's see. I'm gonna start by dropping things. I'm gonna start by getting this one on because this one likes to leak because I'm pretty sure, like I said, I think it's the supply line. I don't want it to kink up, and so I'm trying to figure out if it's too much hose, not enough hose, whatever. Oh God. 50 scars, dude. Why did they make them so hard to work on from the sides? These freaking fenders are massive. Oh God. 50 scars. If you want to work on them, you have to be one with them. That's what I've learned. Oh God. Oh boy. Oh God. Oh, I'm having to do this while bent over. This is not the easiest thing to do. I actually think that'll work pretty well for what we need right now. And hey, let me tell you, if you're ever putting a car together, I hate, and I mean hate, like massive pet peeve, I hate the people that put their hose clamps on in a way that you can't even get to tightening them down. Put your hose clamps on where it's easy to access them. So if you need to take them off or put them back on, make it easy for the next guy, okay? There we go. Okay, that one should be tight enough. And if you guys are wondering, the amount of engagement I have on rubber hose to the actual hard line, the hose is slid back about 1 inch, and so I'm pretty sure that'll be more than enough to really grip this thing. And I'm gonna tighten this down. I used a smaller hose clamp here because I want a more tight pinching surface, hoping that'll help. Also, that's why I grabbed 2 flathead screwdrivers, because I knew that was gonna happen. And for any of those out there who are working on a 56 Buick or are trying to learn how to, and you're wondering what type of transmission fluid these take, because 50 cars, you know, take a different trans fluid than what we have nowadays. Originally this was what was called a Type A trans fluid, and fun fact about the Type A trans fluid, originally it was made with whale oil. I learned that today. They didn't. In some ways these cars are easy to work on, in some ways they're not. Alright, so got trans-cooler lines on. I'm gonna work on getting the radiator hoses on, and when I wired in the fan, you guys are gonna yell at me for this, I didn't exactly do it the smartest way. You gotta assume when you put something on an old car, you're gonna end up having to take it off again at some point. And when I wired the fan in, I just straight butt connected it. So to be able to take the fan off, I just had to cut the wires. Which, yes, I know, that was very stupid. I should have put like male-female connectors on there, splice connectors, whatever you want to call them. So that's also part of what I'm going to repair today on my own time. So I'm going to work on getting the, like I said, radiator hoses back on and kind of connecting things back up. Alright, so got a jug of water here. I'm gonna go ahead and start filling this thing up. What we also have that we are going to go ahead and use is we picked this up from the local hardware store. We're gonna go ahead and try this stuff out, see if this will help flush the system. So what we're gonna do is fill the cooling system with water, dump this in there, and run the car for quite a while, just for today though. Get it nice and warm, just really get this working through the system, and then before it freezes again tonight, we're gonna drain it and then put all the coolant in it so it won't freeze. I ended up fixing a few minor leaks here. They're boring stuff you guys didn't want to see. I assumed the thermostat was gonna leak. I wasn't really hopeful about it. Started dumping water in the thing, started to leak a little bit, so just cleaned up the surfaces again. I put a bunch of RTV on there on all sides of the gasket, hoping that it would seal it up a little bit better. So I have the battery in here now. I'm gonna go ahead and do what I was telling you guys about earlier, where I'm gonna fix the fan connection here so it's not just a butt splice, to where it's an actual male-female connector so you can disconnect it when working on the vehicle. And after that, I mean, fingers crossed, we should be able to start this thing up and get it running, get some good temperature in it, and hopefully that'll start working. I got the fan wired back in. It's not gorgeous. I really don't care though, because I'm just trying to get the car back on the road. I'll eventually buy the right materials to wire it a little more cleanly and how I prefer. I'm kind of nitpicky about wiring. I like to get it as clean as possible because it really can change the whole look of a vehicle if you clean up the wiring versus just leave it a mess, especially on these older cars, which I know it's funny for me to say that with how we wired in the fuel pump, but again, that we put electric fuel pump on here for temporary sake, because the original fuel pump, the seals went bad on it, stopped pumping. So right now electric fuel pump's good, but the reason why I didn't tie in the wiring for the electric fuel pump like into the harness is because it's meant to come back out. We want to run the factory mechanical pump, but for right now that one works. Full of coolant, batteries all hooked up, and trans lines are hooked up. Once we get it running, I'm going to check the trans level. It shouldn't be too incredibly low. It didn't leak a lot when I took it off. I think it's about time to start. A minute. Like I said, it's probably going to be a little bit till she starts. It's been a while. She's an old girl. You kind of got to give her a break. Well, it'd be good to remember to hook that back up. So, figured a few things out. One, wires came out of their crimps. That's why the electric fan wasn't coming on. Again, I told you those crimps weren't the right size, but again, just making it work for now so I can get the car back on the road. We did just get her started a little bit. It just took a little bit of, finagling with the choke and, getting her just the right amount of fuel in there at the same time for her to finally wake up after it's been a while. So I'm going to go ahead and see if she'll start up again, and we'll leave her to idle for a little bit and just let the cooling system run through. Once the thermostat opens, then I'm going to pour the coolant system flush treatment stuff in there. It's full right now, but that's because the thermostat hasn't opened, so it hasn't filled the block or anything. And so we'll kind of just go from there, but let me see if I can get her to start up again. She's actually running pretty good right now. Temp is staying at normal levels. She's running nice and good oil pressure and everything. Right now, just running with the water in it. We're gonna just drive this thing around a little bit, kind of show you guys what it's like driving inside of a 1956 Buick Century. We had a big issue also with her fuel system being super old, it had a lot of old fuel in it. and so the fuel system gummed up and it bent some freaking push rods and all that kind of garbage. So I had to take apart the whole top end of the motor, replace the push rods, all that, and kind of clean it all out. And so for a while there, we were running her on an auxiliary fuel cell in the trunk, and then eventually, after months and months and months of dumping like Berryman's B12 and, you know, all that kind of junk in the fuel tank, we let it sit there and just kind of eat away at all the old fuel. We dumped a bunch of new fuel in there to really help it clear out, and eventually, I mean, it did work really well. And so now kind of what we're doing is we're running it through all the old fuel in the tank with a bunch of filters. We keep a bunch of spare fuel filters with us, and so the idea is to run it out of all the bad garbage fuel. But I mean, honestly, the brakes on this thing, we haven't even touched the brakes since we got in the car, and they're just perfect. Give her the beans and she just takes it, man. This car just cruises. She's not a race car, but she definitely has some get up and go, which is honestly pretty fun to see something this old and completely original motor, and as far as we know, never been rebuilt. Same with the trans, never been into the trans. It's honestly completely how it came from the factory. This car just runs great, you know? And honestly, the biggest thing that we love about this car is just how much attention it gets. I mean, you don't see many pink and white cars just driving around anymore, you know? They had a lot more flair back in the 50s, and that was always the best thing. Come on, you big girl. Yeah, she's running nice and cool. And honestly, this 56 Buick rides better than my 2006 Chevy Silverado does, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'd rather drive this thing every day. I actually, for a little while there, was driving it back and forth to work in the mornings, and evenings, mainly just so I could get some more miles on her, because how are you going to know if a car is reliable if you don't put any miles on them? Actually, as you very well know, there's a guy on YouTube named Bicycle Garage, everybody knows him. One of my favorite things that he says is just get out there and drive them. The cars don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be SEMA cars. They don't have to be, you know, all done up and fancy. Just drive the cars, because honestly, that's what they're there for. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and leave it off for now. I was gonna try and take the car out to get washed right now, but the weather's not really looking great for it. I'd really like to just get the car done for today, get her back in the garage nice and safe. But yeah, that's the very first video for working on this car. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll go ahead and see you guys in the next one.